Hi, and welcome back to Creative Live. My name is Kate Dessa. I'm going to be your host today, and I am thrilled to have Chris Weston back on the platform today, teaching us how to master the art of photography. If you aren't aware of Chris Weston, he is a photographer and a documentary filmmaker, and he is joining us today for a little live kickoff so we can talk a little bit about his new class that launches today. Don't forget, you can watch it for free today for 24 hours. So without further ado, Chris, welcome to the stream.
Well, thank you, Kate, and it's great to be here. It's always to good to connect with the students and other photographers. So thank you for the invitation, and thank you for hosting this.
Yeah, of course. And Chris, tell us where you're joining us from, and we have a worldwide audience. So while Chris tells us a little bit where he's from, everybody else leave in the comments where you're tuning in from. I'm here in Las Vegas. Chris, where are you?
Oh, I'm in England. I'm in the south coast, about 130 miles west of London. So it's kind of getting used to all of this remote connection. But one of the great things is you get to meet with so many different people and so many different nationalities, and I guess that's one of the great things that's come out of these strange times that we're living through.
We get a little bit more connected in a way that we took for granted, at least
Absolutely.
Prior to this.
Absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about the impetus of this class and what sparked you wanting to create it.
So I always broke my personal photography down into three different aspects. One of which was camera craft, learning the skills of using the camera. Understanding what shutter speed does and what aperture does and things like that. The second element was the design of the picture, the composition. So where do you put certain aspects? How do you use blur to emphasize certain elements and things like that? And I always felt there was this one bit missing in terms of training ourselves to be photographers, which was that area of creativity. Where does the story come from? Where does the spark of the idea originate for a photograph? And I think for me, it was one of those things that I never really thought about it in my own photography because it sort of came naturally to me. I learned camera craft, I learned composition. The other bit just sort of happened, and I thought, it'd be great to try and understand what it is that makes that spark happen, and be able to teach it. And so I spent quite a lot of time kind of looking inward about what made me want to take photographs, what motivated me into particular images, why I took certain images and not others, and then started to integrate that into my live workshops and photo safaris. And then I thought, well, in creating the complete photographer online course, I thought that was a really great way to split it up into those three very different aspects of training ourselves to be great photographers.
Yeah, and I think, as a creative myself, and I think most creatives, we often don't really realize what sparks our creativity. It's such an unconscious process when we're not really paying attention. It's,
yes.
We've trained our eyes for so long to identify things. It comes so naturally.
Exactly.
So I'm very excited to hear about a class that kind of breaks down when those ideas, I'm not even consciously thinking of them, how to actually break them down.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, part of it came to me. I spent a lot of time in Japan, and I came across this concept that Japanese artists have called hand, eye, heart. And it was actually it was an ancient Chinese philosophy around art, which was taken to Japan, and initially actually was used by scholars to train young monks in the art of meditation and mindfulness, and a lot of it had to do with this sort of brush painting, sumi-e, and calligraphy, that type of artwork. But their point was that actually to be a great artist, you needed all three aspects, and 2 out of 3 wouldn't be enough. So, and I thought actually that's a really lovely way to explain the whole process of learning photography, because You might be able to skillfully use a camera, and you might know how to design an image, but if you never have an original idea, you won't create great art. And if you have great at having original ideas, but don't know how to transform an idea into a photographic print because you don't know how to use a camera, you won't be able to create great art. And so the course was very much born out of this idea that actually, if we can harness all three aspects, and as you say, start to understand really what motivates us. Why do we want to take pictures? And I'm a wildlife photographer, and so I spend most of my time photographing wildlife, but I'm drawn to certain aspects of wildlife photography. And also, why is that? And what I learned was the more you understand that, then the deeper you get into the storytelling aspect of photography. And I think for me, the role of photography for me is to show or to reveal aspects of the world that most people don't see. It's about telling people about what's going on out there underneath the surface of things. It's like you said, we over time we get used to seeing the world in a particular way, which is our way. And those views, our personal views of the world, are driven by our own experiences, our own prejudices, our own likes and dislikes. And yet you could be standing next to somebody at the exact same spot, and because you both see that world differently, you both end up taking completely different photographs. And I think being able to tap into that is a great way to be able to look at something from a surface point of view, but then rather than take that picture, which is just a physical record of what exists, to be able to go underneath it emotionally and to find out what it is about that subject that inspires you to take the photograph. And if you make that the subject, if you make the inspiration the subject, then that's what makes your photographs unique. And I think the more you develop that, that's what allows you to create your own personal style of photography, like a sort of a signature.
Yeah, absolutely. And, what I was thinking while you were saying all of this was, yes, it's you getting deeper connected to your photography and your style, but it's also just getting more connected to yourself and really understanding what inspires you. And the looking through the lenses allows you to kind of deconstruct what inspires you out in the world, and really allows you to deconstruct yourself in a way, which is a really it's a really interesting way to approach photography and yourself and learning more about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I mean, in some ways, when I started writing this course, my partner, I was telling her what it was about, and I said, essentially, it's about mindfulness in photography, and she said to me, "Yeah, but you're the most mindless person I know," and she has a point, because in my everyday life, I can be quite mindless, but when you put a camera in my hand, I instantly become mindful. And so, in fact, I started to use photography as a way to improve me as in this case, as a boyfriend, but that then spills over into a work colleague, into a father, into a brother, a son, etc. Because I think mindfulness actually does play quite a large part in our everyday lives, and yet I think often we spend a lot of our life kind of running on autopilot because we're full of stuff to do, and we're always sort of catching up or racing to get somewhere. And I think I found, once I kind of discovered this element of photography, I quite rightly, as you say, I started to use it to start just having little impacts on my own personal life. I started to apply what I did with a camera simply to being at home. And I've seen huge benefits, particularly in personal relationships, as I say, whether that be with partners, whether it be with children, whether it be with work. So there is this kind of spin-off that photography can help you to become mindful, and practicing mindfulness in photography can actually improve the other side of your life. And I think that's a really, for me, a really great reason for everybody to go out and take photographs. So
I couldn't agree more. So with that, I think we're gonna play a video, one of the lessons that actually you intro into mindfulness and photography. So Adam, go ahead and play the video for us.
I love waterfalls, the power and the sound of the cascading water, the patterns it creates, and the spray that catches your skin, and the smell. Being out in nature like this is what I love about my job. But here's the challenge. How do you use this to capture all of that information, all of those sensory inputs, and get it to work on a flat piece of paper? Well, I never said photography was easy. The first step in creating photographs, as opposed to taking simple snapshots, is knowing that it's not just what you see that moves you to create a photograph, it's everything you're sensing in the moment. The sounds and the smells, your mood and your emotions. And that means you have to be present. You have to be in the moment to capture the moment. Remember that old saying, photography is F8 and be there? Well, it's a fib. Photography isn't about physically being somewhere, it's about being present emotionally to wherever you are. Or, put another way, it's about being mindful. Now, there's been a lot of stuff written about mindfulness recently. It's become one of those buzzwords, and a lot of what's written misses the point. Mindfulness isn't about being aware of your surroundings. It's about being aware of your emotional response to and your thoughts about your surroundings. For example, I'm aware of the existence of this waterfall. I can see it. But if I go no further than that physical awareness, when I take a photograph, what I'll end up with is a rather soulless record shot of a waterfall, which is what we're aiming to move beyond in our photography. When I'm mindful, I am not only aware of the waterfall's existence, I'm also aware of how it's affecting me emotionally and physiologically. For example, how am I reacting to the sound? Well, with a camera in my hand, I find it soothing and relaxing. It adds to my emotional response to the scene. On the other hand, standing in front of John with his video camera trying to record my voice as we make this lesson, I'm getting annoyed by how it's interfering with our ability to capture a clean soundtrack. The sound is the same, but my emotional reaction to it is different depending on the circumstances I view it from. And there, right there, is the reason you can put two photographers in the exact same place and get two completely different photographs. The way we see the world is entirely dependent on the utterly unique way our mind interprets the data it receives. That's the importance of mindfulness in photography. By being aware of how you are emotionally responding to a subject, you're able to create photographs that tell a story that goes far deeper than the physical appearance of the subject. Now, later in the course, we'll look at examples of how this approach to photography works, and I'll show you how to use the camera to make photographs that capture not just what you see, but how you feel about what you see. Before then, however, there are a couple of other aspects of mindfulness I want to make you aware of.
All right. Well, this is a really great little snippet. This is only a sneak peek lesson 2 of his class that's about to start here at 9:30. Before we go in and talk a little bit more about that lesson, I want to do a couple shout outs to everybody watching right now. Connie Wheeler from Texas. We have Denmark in the house, Texas, San Francisco, Scotland, India, New Jersey, Zimbabwe, the Netherlands. So thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in and telling us where you're watching from. It's so nice to interact with such a worldwide community. Chris, tell us a little bit about how, in this lesson you talk about bringing mindfulness and the calm of the river to your photography. So let's elaborate a little bit on that concept some more.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's probably important to touch on is what do we mean by mindfulness? Because unfortunately, like a lot of these sort of what appear to be new ideas, it kind of gets caught up with marketing, and then all sorts of things are written about mindfulness that really aren't necessarily not true, but not necessarily fully encompassing. And I spent a lot of time trying to understand what did it really mean about being mindful, and so this particular module that talks about mindfulness in photography is broken down into three main parts, which is, first of all, is about awareness, which is what we've just seen in the example video there. That an awareness is, as it says, is not about physical awareness. It's not about being aware of what you're seeing necessarily, but it's about being aware of how you are emotionally responding to what is going on around you. And then using, and in terms of photography, using those emotions to drive the creative aspect of the photograph. And so, with a waterfall, as it says, you can see a waterfall in many different ways. You can see it in terms of its calmness, and it can be very relaxing sitting by a waterfall. At the same time, you think about the water tumbling over at high speed and all of that power that's going on. It's full of energy and fast action and pace. So how you respond to that can be very different. And so the idea of bringing that awareness and your emotional awareness to, as I say, what's moving you about a particular scene or subject that's then inspiring you to take a photograph. If you understand with the waterfall as an example that actually it's actually about the calmness of it, it's about the relaxation and the soothing nature of it, then what you can then do is say, right, well, what I want to create here is an image that has the energy of calmness, of slow movement. And in that sense, when I'm setting up the camera, I need to set the camera up in order to capture that emotion, not just the physical presence. And again, this is why understanding how to control the camera becomes very important in photography. This is the reason we should get it off the auto settings and not allow the camera to make decisions for us as photographers, but take control of the camera. And in this case, I set a slow shutter speed to allow the motion to kind of move through time. And then you end up with a photograph that matches the energy of the emotion that you felt at the time. With mindfulness, what then happens is you move into two other areas that go way beyond just awareness. And one of them is about judgment. We tend, as human beings, we tend to be very judgmental, and photography is a very judgmental process. I mean, you pick a camera up and you look at things and you judge whether you want to take a picture of them or not.
Yeah.
And then you judge how you want to take it. And and we talk about light. It's either the light's no good or the light's great, or there's nothing interesting about this subject. Well, that's a judgmental opinion, and the light's not good. That's judgmental. And so I think, again, one of the things that became very clear to me was that photography is about letting go of those judgments. Photography is about, and the creative, because the problem with judgments is it blocks your creativity. As soon as you say the light's no good, it forces you down a particular route, as opposed to saying, well, the light's no good for what I wanted to do, but it could be good for something else. What can I do with it? That's creative. You could look at a subject and say, well, I can't see anything interesting, so I'm going to move on to the next subject, as opposed to saying, which is judgmental, as opposed to saying, well, at first glance, this subject isn't interesting, but what if I dig a little bit deeper? What if I just kind of look at it with a different angle, or look for the small details rather than the big scene? Can I find something in there that actually has a story to tell? And that's where creativity comes from. And it's interesting in terms of my own work. I've started to branch out into filmmaking as well as photography. And obviously with filmmaking, a lot of the time you're trying to find stories. And what I found when I'm kind of researching stories, ideas for film and for documentaries, is that you start off with this big story, and the big story sounds great, but as you delve into that big story, you start to find little nuggets that are beyond great. They're the real story. And that's what you end up making the film about, or that's what you end up making the documentary about. It's the little bits that often get hidden in the big picture. And I think, so for me, this whole idea of letting go of judgment is simply saying, let's stop seeing the big picture and judging whether or not it's good enough for a photograph, and actually start to see some of the smaller elements, even just picking out elements of design, line, shape, pattern, texture. There's a bit in the course where I've set myself a challenge to photograph my home county of Lincolnshire. Now, anybody who's not from England won't know a lot about Lincolnshire, other than to say it is potentially the most boring county in England, which I know is judgmental, but
sounds like where I'm from, which is the Midwest. It's very flat, right?
Well, actually, Lincolnshire is often compared to Idaho.
Oh, now, all right.
I don't know whether that's fair or not. I've never been to Idaho, but it kind of gives you an idea. Anyway, so I set myself this task of, in teaching about letting go of judgment, of trying to get a really great photograph of Lincolnshire. And that involves me letting go of this judgment I've held since I was a 5-year-old kid, that there's nothing to photograph in Lincolnshire. And I'd actually done the photograph, and we'd finished the filming, and I was on my way back, and we were driving down the road behind a bunch of tractors and lorries, and drove past this field of vegetables. Now, I can't imagine anybody would necessarily think to stop and photograph a field of vegetables, but as I drove past, and because I drove past quite quickly, I didn't see it in its entirety. I just saw the kind of the elements as I went past, and all I saw was this field of line and shape and texture, and it was beautiful. I mean, truly beautiful. So we stopped the car, and I did a quick couple of minutes to the camera and took some photographs of this field of vegetables, which, when you see the photographs, are a perfect composition of design elements brought together to tell a story. But it was about letting go of that judgment. It's a field of vegetables, and seeing the better picture. So I think judgment is one aspect of it. And then I think the final part of mindfulness is letting go of the attachment to an outcome, because being attached to outcomes means we open ourselves up to disappointment. And it also means that if you are so hell-bent on one particular thing, you kind of forget everything else that's going on around you. And it's a little bit like when you pick up a camera and you put the viewfinder to your eye, you see the world through this little rectangular box, and everything else disappears. It's only what's in that box. And yet sometimes, and I find this a lot with wildlife photography, if you just put the camera down a couple of inches and look, and all of a sudden you see that there's something going on over here, and then there's something going on over there. And actually, if you turn around, the real action's usually going on right behind you. So letting go of that attachment to something specific, it just opens up the doors of creativity to say, look, I know that's what you wanted to do, but hey, I've got something better for you. So that's what generally the first module is about. It's about those three aspects of opening up the human mind, which is very much often closed to the way that we are in any given moment in time and situation, and opening it up to this world of potential, this world of possibility, because that's where creativity is found.
Absolutely. So we have another video queued up that is a good segue into awareness and accepting without judgment the outcomes. So we're going to play a little video that has a little bit more action for us. All right, and this is a little BTS video from Chris. Tell us where this is taken from, and tell us a little bit about bringing awareness when a bear is eating your camera.
Well, the one thing I will say is that whenever you're around any great predators like bears, it's always helpful to be mindful. But actually, that was filmed up in Alaska, in a national park called Katmai National Park, and this is an area that's right on the coast of Katmai, and It's a seasonal area for wildlife photography because it's all connected to the salmon run. So the salmon are coming in from the Pacific and heading up the channels to go and spawn in their home pools. And of course, it's fast food time for bears because they've got all of this food. And so what the bears are doing is stocking up for hibernation. Basically, they're eating as much as they can, getting as big and fat as they can before they go into hibernation in the winter. And it's for anybody interested in wildlife photography, I would say I get asked the question, what's your favorite subject to photograph or your favorite place to photograph? And to be honest, it's an almost impossible question to answer. It's a little bit like saying, which is your favorite child, your son or your daughter? There's no good answer to that question. And it's in wildlife photography terms, it's hard to say because bears are very different to lions, which are very different to gorillas, etc. But I have to say, if I had to choose one, bears would sit at the top of my list of animals to photograph. And Katmai is the place I've been to the most and the place I most look forward to going back to. And it's just a fantastic environment, and you're out there with the animals without any protection around you. I mean, you're actually in the moment with them, and that's the point I often make again about photography and bringing mindfulness to photography and capturing images that go beyond just simple snapshots or record shots, which is we often talk about photography as being capturing the decisive moment or capturing the moment. And my point is, well, if you want to capture the moment, you've got to be in the moment. And I think that video of the bear was a kind of a point of being in the moment. We were photographing up in Katmai, and I was just doing a little bit of, as you say, sort of behind the scenes filming, and we'd put a couple of GoPro cameras out. And bears are incredibly curious creatures, and I'd kind of positioned it. What I do is try and figure out where are the bears going to go, and you look at their habits and their behaviors under certain circumstances. And again, this all comes down to this, not just simply turning up and snapping away, but turning up and watching and being aware of what's going on, so that that in itself can actually improve your photography because it allows you to anticipate shots as opposed to try and react. And of course, with wildlife photography, often when we're reacting to things, they happen too quickly and we miss the shot. So that ability just to kind of get yourself a second or two ahead of the game is important. So I'd spent some time figuring out where the bears are going to go. We'd put these couple of GoPros down, and then this bear just I think he saw the little flashing red light on the front of the GoPro, and he just sidled up to it and started eating it. And I thought, well, that's $500 down the pan. But he eventually spat it out, and it was tied to like a gorilla pod, little tripod thing. And when that's why it didn't just float off down into the Pacific. One of them did, but that one didn't. And so we managed to retrieve it. And we were so excited getting back to the boat. So I get the little SD card out, say, "What have we got? What have we got?" And it was a great moment. And and sometimes it's nice to be in a way on the other side of the camera. I think I spent a lot of time actually not taking pictures. I'll have my camera with me, but sometimes I'm just sitting and just soaking in what's going on, because I find that's also telling me about, say, how am I responding to this? What is it I love about this place? And then that is informing how I then go about photographing it. And so sometimes putting the camera down and letting bears do their own photography, you never know what you end up with.
All right, Chris. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This little live preview went by real fast for us, and everyone is super excited for the class. So remember, if you are tuning in here, please head over to the class. Kenna, my co-host, has dropped links into the comments for you guys to head over. The class starts in just 1 minute. So again, thank you so much for joining us, Chris, for this little live kickoff, and we will see you next time.
I look forward to it. Thanks to everybody for turning up, and thanks for hosting it.
Yeah, absolutely.